members of council, members of the executive management, members of Senate, our inaugurant this afternoon, Professor Shakila Singh, family and friends of Professor Singh, academic and professional staff, students, alumni, and distinguished guests. On behalf of the Vice Chancellor and Principal, Professor Nanapoku, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the inaugural lecture of Professor Shakila Singh. The Vice Chancellor conveys his congratulations and best wishes to Professor Shakila Singh. A special welcome to our guests from universities and organizations within South Africa, the African continent, and across the globe. Inaugural lectures form part of the university's public lecture series and may only be presented by newly appointed full professors who have been appointed in academic schools and centers. Inaugural lectures present an opportunity for showcasing the exciting and groundbreaking research and teaching being carried out by professors in our university. Each lecture represents a significant milestone in an academic's career, providing official recognition of their promotion or appointment to full professorship. These lectures are furthermore an ideal opportunity for new professors to introduce themselves and to present an overview of their own contribution to their field to academic peers, students, and research collaborators. Inaugural lectures are also a platform for celebrating a professor's academic achievements with his or her family, friends, mentors, and colleagues. Distinguished guests, it is now my pleasure to introduce the Dean and Head of School, Professor Vitalis Chikoko, who will formally introduce the inaugurant, Professor Shakila Singh.
Thank you, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Professor Mkhize. I have the honor to introduce the inaugurant. Professor Shakila Singh is a professor in the discipline of gender education at the School of Education, College of Humanities, in the University of KwaZulu-Natal, Durban, South Africa. Professor Singh received a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Durban Westville, now University of KwaZulu-Natal. She obtained a higher education diploma from the University of South Africa, an honors degree in education, and a master's degree from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. She was awarded a split-side Commonwealth scholarship for study in the UK and completed a doctoral degree through the University of Sussex in the UK and the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa in 2003. Professor Singh joined the then Faculty of Education as a junior laboratory technician in 1985 as an undergraduate and subsequently pursued a postgraduate study. She moved from lecturer in 2005 to senior lecturer in 2010 to associate professor in 2017 and full professor in 2021. Professor Singh started her academic journey in science education and later branched into gender education. Her research is driven by contemporary priorities. Her PhD study was conceptualized at the height of the HIV and AIDS pandemic, with much of the data showing highest prevalence in the 15 to 19-year age group. She focused her study on secondary school learners, seeking to understand why, despite the increase in knowledge about HIV transmission, new infections continued to rise. This led her to examine sexual identity constructions and risk behavior of youth. Her subsequent scholarship focuses mainly on gender violence in educational institutions. Her research and publications make a significant contribution to scholarship and practice through a cogent body of work in the areas of gender, sexuality, and gender violence, and she obtained a C2 rating from the National Research Foundation in 2016. Professor Singh has successfully completed the supervision of 9 doctoral and 14 master's students and published over 40 research articles in high-quality journals and books. She is co-editor with Professor Divya Bana and Professor Thabo Msebi of a book published by Palgrave Macmillan titled Gender, Sexuality and Violence in South African Educational Spaces in 2021. He is deeply committed to responsible community engagement that is research-led and impacts the broader communities and society that the university serves. She led a curriculum subcommittee in the School of Education Peace Building Task Team. This entailed developing responsive curricula and materials that academics, teachers, students, and community members can use in view of the violent unrest in KZN in 2021. She co-led the curriculum team that developed the groundbreaking module on critical social justice that was developed to address gender-based violence at universities and the community. This is currently a compulsory module for all first-year students at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Professor Singh has examined several master's and PhD theses from national and international universities. She's a reviewer for several high-impact journals, including Gender Education, Perspectives in Education, Sex Education, African Journal of Education, Journal of Public Administration, South African Journal of Higher Education, Health Education Journal, Culture, Health and Sexuality, Sexualities, African Journal of Psychology, and Agenda. He is also a guest editor of some special issues. Professor Singh has been an invited speaker at several international conferences and workshops. She was invited as a visiting academic affiliate to the University of Sydney in Australia and a visiting academic to the University of Chandigarh in India. She was also nominated for the Erasmus Plus Mobility for Teaching at the Liepāja University in Latvia. She gave invited lectures at several national and international universities, including the University of Sussex in the UK, Homi Bhabha Center for Science Education in India, Cape Peninsula University of Technology, Mangosuthu University of Technology, and the University of South Africa. She has received many awards for her work as a teacher, mentor, and researcher. These include the UDW Chancellor's Award for Excellence for Outstanding Academic and Research Achievement, the Best Paper Award at 2 international conferences, a School of Education Award for Excellence in Teaching, an award for Excellence in Community Engagement Output, an award for Excellence in Mentorship of Early Career Academics, an award as one of the top 10 women researchers in the College of Humanities, a Dean's Commendation on Excellence in Research, and an award for top performing researcher. Professor Shakila Singh, I now ask you to present your lecture.
Thank you, Prof. Greetings to the Vice Chancellor of the University of KwaZulu-Natal, the Deputy Vice Chancellor, the Registrar, the Dean and Head of School of Education, my family, my colleagues and students, my supervisors and mentors, my friends and family joining from around the world. These are recent statistics, recent headlines about gender violence in South Africa. We read every day about rape, partner violence, femicide, homophobic violence, and we know that it is only a fraction that gets reported. Gender violence is a worldwide concern and has sparked much research about its causes, consequences, and prevention, and into what makes someone more susceptible to being a perpetrator or a victim. Much of the research shows that gender violence and gender inequalities mutually serve each other. Gender equality is a key cause of gender violence, and gender violence is a major barrier to achieving gender equality. Gender is everywhere and used to explain almost everything. It is so deeply entrenched that we see it as natural. And as Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie states, gender as it functions today is a grave injustice. It is problematic because it prescribes how we should be rather than recognizes how we are. The notion of gender has been troubled by Butler 1990, and gender continues to be troubled. To trouble gender is to question the performance of gender-segregated roles and expectations within families, the married space, schools, workplaces, and the community, all of which are divided along gender lines. A lot of hard work goes into addressing gender inequality and challenging harmful versions of masculinity and femininity. by moving beyond fixed notions of gender. But can we go beyond? Can we think of a world without gender? What would such a world look like? Gender is at the heart of systems of difference. And difference itself is not a problem, except when it's the basis for discrimination and inequality. And degendering does not mean disregarding difference, but that differences don't matter. It diminishes the socially constructed differences that create and promote inequalities. Excuse me. And degendering would not turn men into women or women into men. It is precisely about recognizing diversity by dismantling a rigid binary system comprising of two opposite categories with unequal power and value. And that power is at the heart of gender violence. So what would it mean for such violence in a world without gender? I will examine this question by drawing on my research on gender and sexual violence at higher educational institutions. My scholarship aims to connect my teaching, activism, research, and my personal life. My research is driven by a desire to unmask some of the things we take for granted or regard as common sense or normal or natural. And to quote an 18th century poet, Novalis, I focus on making the familiar strange and the strange familiar. My academic journey started in science education. My interest was in how students learn science. For example, how race, class, gender, religion, etc., featured in the learning of science. From the early years, I had the support and mentorship of phenomenal intellectuals, including the late Dr. Prem Naidu, Professor Labhi Ramrathan, Professor Logan Naidu, Professor Reshma Sukraj, and Professor Pramolin Mudali. And while I worked as a technician in science education laboratory, I was invited by Professor Jonathan Jansen to enroll for a master's research supervised by him. I was as delighted as I was terrified, and he set me on my academic journey. My master's topic was on students' belief on the origins of life, and I looked at the creation-evolution conundrum, examining the relationship between belief and understanding. My aim was to examine how students navigated between their personal religious beliefs and scientific theory. My move from science education to gender education was not actually a shift, because I don't see science and society as binary opposites. Actually, my work in science, my training and work in science education complements my work in gender education. And I do not feel compelled to swing from quantitative to qualitative research methodologies. Like other feminist researchers, I draw on the strengths of quantitative method and qualitative methods and explore mixed method approaches which allow me to examine the extent and nature of phenomena. My awareness of gender started in my early childhood. I am one of 5 children, 4 amazing girls and 1 amazing boy. However, this presented my parents, Somdat and Renuka Singh, with particular challenges in a largely patriarchal society where girls' education was not prioritized. And they struggled against all odds to provide equal opportunities for us. My dad encouraged all of us to pursue a career in the science stream, a mainly masculinized field of study, and to know that anyone can do science and that it's not too complex for girls. We learned about my mom's experience of being prevented from going to high school and her act of defiance, assisted by her grandmother, she made her way to high school, but she couldn't go far. Nonetheless, she went on to be a community teacher and activist. She started a kindergarten school under the stairway for the children in her neighborhood. And she also initiated empowerment programs in the community at a local clinic. My PhD study marked my academic entry into the field of gender studies. At the height of the HIV and AIDS pandemic, there were massive campaigns to increase knowledge about HIV and transmission and prevention, yet numbers soared. And I was interested in finding out why. Even though knowledge had increased, there seemed to be no corresponding behavior change. I was fortunate to win a Spritz-side Commonwealth Scholarship for PhD study in the UK and South Africa. And I enrolled for Doctor of Education, a degree through UKZN. I had the privilege of being supervised by Professor Michael Samuel, whose mentorship continues. I spent a year at the University of Sussex in the UK and had the opportunity to work with a leading professor, Professor Mairead Dunn, with expertise in science and gender, who launched me into gender and identity theories. My work in gender was further developed through the critical support of outstanding scholars, including particularly Professor Divya Bana, whose support spans many years. My scholarship has been powerfully influenced by my formal and social interactions with Professor Thabo Msibi, and I'm deeply committed to reflecting on my own socialization and unlearning limiting ways of thinking and acting. In my academic and personal lives, my daughters Shivani and Devanya continue to be my profound teachers. Through them, I constantly engage with the complexities of free will and agency within a highly gendered patriarchal society. While they were growing up, I frequently struggled with balancing freedom and individual choice within our context of gender violence, where girls are at a greater risk. And Devanya often challenged me and pointed out contradictions when I said girls should wear whatever they want to, but no, you shouldn't leave the house wearing that, or you should not stay out too late. I shouldn't have to, but then there is gender. I have the extraordinary benefit of an independently feminine spouse, Praveen Motilal. He's a remarkable intellectual catalyst who not only spends hours reading, critiquing, and adding valuable insights to my work, but prominently displays in many of his everyday words and actions that gender doesn't matter. In my research, I align with theories of gender that reject the notion that biology determines people's attitudes, behaviors, talents, and emotions. There are, of course, some physiological differences based mainly on hormones and internal and external sex organs, and these are used to determine someone's biological sex, mainly on a binary, that is a system of two, male and female. This itself is disputed, since it does not acknowledge the existence of individuals who have a combination of hormones and organs. An example we are familiar with is that of Caster Semenya. I use theories of gender that see gender and sexuality in dynamic relations, and as both as multiple, provisional, and situated, not fixed. I use theories of gender that take gender as the social meanings attached to biological sex, the characteristics that society or culture defines as masculine or feminine. I draw on theorists like Candace West and Don Zimmerman, who explain that gender is not something we have, but something we do. And Judith Lobber, who asserts that gender is a human invention rather than a natural division. I also use Judith Butler, who explains gender as performative. It is comprised of routinized bodily speech practices rather than the manifestation of an inner essence. Butler asserts that gender as an objective natural thing does not exist. In keeping with my focus on making the familiar strange, I researched love and marriage with university students, focusing on the gendered nature of love and future marriage goals. The findings suggest that young people are entrapped within gendered notions of discourses of romantic love. And the socially constructed ideals of love contribute to women's commitment to forming and remaining in relationships, even if they're abusive. The findings also show how particular versions of masculinity make men unsafe, and that they have to challenge these limiting constructions to exercise more power in personal relations. The overall findings show that dominant versions of femininities and masculinities facilitate gender-based violence, gender violence. I had two major NRF-funded projects. The first was a project on safer learning spaces addressing gender-based violence at universities and schools. And I worked with a team of brilliant researchers, Professor Sheena Singh Pillay, Mrs. Bongeka Mabaso, and Professor Ronika Mudali. The project arose out of the concern that the university was a place of gender and sexual violence for and by students. This project included a focus on understanding and experiences of gender violence in the university community, intimate partner violence, sexual harassment, places for gender violence, homophobia, and fear of sexual assault. The findings add to the evidence that the main perpetrators of gender violence are men, and the main victims are women and non-conforming men. And the research pointed to the need for consciousness raising of people of all genders to disrupt notions of masculinity as being naturally dominant and aggressive, and femininity as being weak and submissive, and challenge the ideas that perpetuate and promote gender norms that often result in and condone gender violence. All evidence points to the problematic constructions of gender violence. The second NRF funded project was on alcohol use and gender violence at university. And it arose out of the recognition of strong links between alcohol abuse and gender violence. Alcohol is a common activity amongst university students and is often present in incidents of gender violence. While it may be common understanding that alcohol causes violence, there is no clear evidence to support this. The findings of this project show how unequal gender power, resulting from dominant constructions of masculinity and femininities, promote gender violence. And if we continue to blame alcohol for gender violence, then the culpability of the perpetrators remain hidden. So a better understanding of how to disrupt gender norms that promote the idea that drunken male behavior is to be expected and unchangeable will be more useful than a simplistic approach that aims simply to prevent alcohol use. Findings from both these projects show that to address gender violence at university, we have to include, but move beyond strengthening security measures, and punishment of perpetrators. We have to actively engage students in reflecting on and challenging ways that the constructions of gender normalize violence against women and marginalized genders. The vast data about men as perpetrators of violence has put masculinities under the spotlight. And much of the work on masculinities and violence by scholars such as Robert Morrell and Michael Kimmel shows gender norms as determinants of men's violence against women, and that violence maintains and expresses men's power over women. The research points to the need for a remaking of masculinities towards more peaceable versions for violence prevention. Michael Kimmel, while recognizing how gender is implicated in gender violence, asks if we need to do away with gender altogether, or can we use the ideas of gender to mobilize change? For example, get men to take a stand against violence against women and children. And masculinity theorists such as Flood caution against reducing boys as perpetrators or potential perpetrators, stating that this could alienate boys who have themselves been violated. Flood, together with Kopano Gratela, reminds us that men experience pain, and this is largely ignored. Gratela stresses that when thinking about violence and masculinity, one needs to understand the context. And in our society, structural violence, failures of government, and economic inequality underpin much of the violent behavior that men display. My research aligns with the work that focuses on the relational aspects of gender and argue that making femininities and masculinities problematic is an essential move in addressing gender reform. So what makes gender problematic is that gender socialization amplifies differences and reduces the similarities between males and females. Men and women are separated according to selected physiological differences, and the overlaps between men and women and male and female bodies are ignored. Gendered performances are available to everyone, but some are encouraged and some are suppressed. And the everyday acts of reinforcing the sex-gender as a system of presumed difference imposed behavior and interaction in ways that create and become a basis for inequality. We learn from a very young age from our parents, our teachers, our friends, media, religion, etc., what is normal and acceptable for someone of our gender. And we are subsequently punished, formally or informally, when we stray from those norms. Girls are taught to speak softly and sit and walk in a ladylike manner, and boys are allowed and encouraged to be loud and play roughly. Girls are socialized to be more caring, and boys are trained to hide their feelings. There is significant scholarship that has questioned the presumed naturalness of the binary man masculinity, woman femininity, and challenged biological determinism, which is often used to justify male dominance and female subordination. Dismantling the social divide between males and female is an ongoing feminist goal, and several theorists have suggested that we remake gender, that we move towards gender neutrality. So we do not deny the existence of bodily differences between men and women, The opposition is to the power, unequal power and status awarded to male bodies over female bodies. We have made significant progress in challenging racial divisions, yet we mostly see gender divisions as natural. Think of the people we know. Few have only typically feminine or typically masculine characteristics. Most people have a combination of characteristics. For example, you may be physically big and muscular and enjoy cooking, or you may be sensitive and caring and enjoy building things. We can see how specific ideas about types of clothing, colors, codes of sport, family roles, careers, etc., change over time and in different contexts, while some are more enduring than others. We see positive changes when norms, expectations, and evaluations of women and men seem to be converging. These are evidence that gender is not real. It is fictitious and can be changed, or dare we say, eliminated. There is increased understanding about multiple genders and sexualities, as evident in the LGBTQI plus awareness. And some may argue that focusing on an ideal of a genderless society might well be counterproductive to the expansion of freedom for non-normative genders and sexualities. But degendering is not about sameness. It is at the core of a post-gender society is the appreciation of diversity amongst individuals. With the understanding that gender is something constructed and not fixed or natural, it is something we do, and we regularly think about how we can do it differently. Can we think about not doing it at all? This is not easy, since it is all we know and continue to reproduce. Do you remember the book, Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus? That suggests that we are so different that we might as well have come from different planets. And it was a bestseller. Well, how do we explain why boys and girls, and men and women appear to be so different? The answer lies in the binary constructions themselves. The formation and reinforcement of two separate social categories with distinct expectations, with distinct messages and expectations has a powerful effect on the way we behave and the way we perceive others and ourselves. Gender is self-fulfilling. We create and reinforce the distinctions, and then we use those differences to validate the differences. For example, we encourage the activity and rough play amongst boys, and when they play roughly, we explain it as boys will be boys. We encourage women to teach in the foundation phase, and then explain the dominance of women in the foundation phase, women teachers in the foundation phase as women being more nurturing. We draw on examples of other mammals in the animal kingdom, like lions and lionesses, to support biological explanations in temperament and gender roles. But we are not lions and lionesses. They come with built-in weapons and claws and teeth for attack and defense. Our ancestors have had to invent weapons to do the same. There's a common belief that male and females have different mentalities, that there are certain parts of the brain that are dominant in women and men, which make women naturally more sensitive and emotional, and men more aggressive, and sexual. However, there is no conclusive evidence of difference in male and female brain. A neuroscientist, Daphne Joel and Lubna Vikansky, in their book, Gender Mosaic, draws on scientific evidence as well as their research and disrupt the perception of male and female brain. They argue that every human brain is a unique assortment or mosaic of so-called male and female features, and that these cannot be separated into two neat categories. What about psychological differences? According to Raymond Connell, more than 100 years of research that investigated broad psychological differences between men and women have found remarkably few. She cites evidence from studies involving millions of people to show that men as a group and women as a group are psychologically significantly more similar than different, and that different mentalities is a myth. With particular reference to gender violence, these scholars argue that we cannot explain men's participation in violence by male brain or male hormones or anything supposed to produce different mentalities amongst men and women. The idea of a degendered society is not new. According to Lauber, Martin, we would never know how much of gendering is biology and how much is socially constructed, unless we have a degendered society that does not produce or exaggerate differences amongst men and women, boys and girls. And Risman, Lauber, and Sherwood, in their analysis of a world beyond gender, describe a post-gender world as a just world. In this world, where gender doesn't matter, we will be free of gender oppression, injustice, and inequality. However, Juliet Lauber's degendering focuses mainly on Western interests, including roles associated with the families, children, power imbalances in the work and governments. And they state that it would not directly combat sexual harassment, rape, and physical violence, even though it might weaken the justification of dominant or abusive masculinities. But I argue that dismantling gender will go a long way in reducing sexual violence and gendered violence that hinge on asymmetrical power, patterns of gender power. Much of the research on gender and sexual violence has focused on how we do gender and how we could do it differently so that we don't oppress, dominate, or violate others. My research adds to the literature, which shows that sexual violence against women is linked to women's objectification and men's sexual entitlement. And research on sexual harassment show that it's driven by control and domination. Furthermore, the norms of femininity put women at risk. So what does it mean practically for us to work towards a world without gender in our context? It would mean that we have to think deeply about how our ideas about gender became common sense. And it would mean unlearning some of the fundamental beliefs that we were raised on. It may even mean giving up some privileges that come with the existing gender order. It should mean we pay attention to how we interact with each other, our language, how we raise our children, what roles we attach to boys and girls, what behaviors and emotions we encourage and discourage, what opportunities we create. Think about families, schools, universities, religion, work, politics, from a non-gendered social order without hierarchies. I do acknowledge the complexity of intersectionality on how multiple identity markers such as race, class, size, ableness, etc., interact to create patterns of oppression, and that there will still be conflict between people. By dismantling gender, we will work towards a society where selected physical differences do not determine a preset status or preset suitability for particular kinds of temperament, behaviors, or activities. It does not mean ignoring physical differences on a group level between people with male or female body parts, but understanding that this won't affect the colors we choose, we wear, the ability to do math or write poetry, the ability to drive a vehicle, fly a plane, cook a meal, etc. Body parts won't determine the choice of names, clothing, or toys. In schools, children will be organized according to interests, skills, reading ability, math competence, depend on what the groups are for. Individuals will have equal status and value. We won't have sons and daughters, but children. No mothers and fathers but parents. No husbands and wives but spouses. No girlfriends and boyfriends but partners. And no brothers and sisters but siblings. And I would like to wish my eldest sibling, Ishara, a very happy birthday. A world without gender means that the form of one's genitals, whether male or female, or intersex, does not determine someone's worth. Everyone will be encouraged to develop their full potential. It will be a world where positive and beneficial characteristics such as empathy, kindness, confidence, and assertiveness would be encouraged in everyone, irrespective of their physical differences. Characteristics considered to be undesirable and harmful, such as entitlement and aggressiveness, are discouraged, and people who display them are helped to overcome them. And who would benefit? The benefit will be to people of all existing genders. In a world without gender, no one has the pressure to earn or achieve gender status through particular displays like being a provider or protector, removing the feelings of inadequacy that often result in violent expression. No children are given guns as toys, and all children play with dolls. Violence is discouraged and caring is encouraged. Everyone are able to express their pain and vulnerability and seek help when required. The notion of women as victims and men as perpetrators of violence currently does not allow boys and men to recognize themselves as victims. Nobody is disadvantaged and subordinated in a hierarchy that makes them vulnerable to gender violence. No misogyny. People's physical body characteristics are not markers for their value and predetermined allocation to any activity. People who do not fit into the discrete and opposite categories, live freely and without fear. People are completely free to love whoever they like, disrupting the gender-sexuality connection. Anyone who is violated is able to report the violation and get appropriate support without stigma. There will be no male entitlement and female objectification, which are major contributors to gender and sexual violence. And no one will consider another person their property that they would rather kill than let go. Think about how often we hear about men not being able to manage rejection or hurting or murdering ex-partners. To summarize and conclude, harmful constructions, gendered constructions are normalized in the mainstream understandings of masculinities and femininities and are seldom questioned in day-to-day interaction. Degendering rejects the notions such as men's desire to control and dominate women, and women's desire to love and care as natural manifestations. It reflects on how gender is constructed through socialization and how these notions may be disrupted to prevent gender violence. A world without gender will be a world with significantly less, if not no violence. Thank you for your attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, you will agree with me that this was an inspiring and timely lecture. Let me take this opportunity to thank Professor Shakila Singh for this inspiring inaugural lecture this afternoon. Thank you very much, Prof, for sharing your academic journey with us and for inspiring us in the way that you have done towards a genderless society. It can be done, as you have demonstrated through your thoughtful analysis. As UKZN, we are very proud to have you as a member of our academic community, and we look forward to continuing this journey with you and together. Indeed, gender-based violence has emerged as one of the most pressing social ills of our time. On a regular basis, we learn about violence directed at young girls, minors, the elderly, as well as those whose life orientations are different from what is considered to be normative. Your research on a genderless society sheds light on how best we can address these issues in order to regain our humanity. We are truly grateful also to your family, maybe your first educators whose shoulders you stand on, whom I am certain have been the bedrock behind your successes. Today's lecture has been attended by several delegates within the University of KwaZulu-Natal, as well as outside the university, in the country and beyond South Africa's shores. To all of you, members of the local and international community, thank you very much for sharing the successes of Shakila, Professor Shakila Singh with us this afternoon. Finally, I would like to thank the acting dean and the head of the school, Professor Vitalis Chikoko, as well as the former dean and now DVC of the Teaching and Learning, Professor Thabo Msibi, and all the colleagues in the School of Education, the college, as well as the university at large, for providing a stimulating intellectual home to our inaugurant, Professor Singh. Last but not least, to our corporate relations team led by Ms. Noma Zondo, Ms. Pamela Adams, Ms. Sandra Ramsurup, and many others, as well as our IT team. Thank you very much for organizing this lecture for us. And how can I forget the administrative team led by the registrar, Dr. Kathy Cleland. Thank you very much for organizing yet another flawless lecture this afternoon. With those words, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all and may you go in peace. Thank you.